Okay, I've started the recording. So, good evening, good morning, good afternoon for our different one and all who have joined from different time zones. And this is our third meetup for Indianapolis. And the topic that we are going to cover is on reviewing a complex Dataweave transformation. And we have our special speaker, Alex, here. So, let me start with the introduction first. Can everyone see this presentation that I'm sharing? Okay. So I'm the organizer here, and we have another organizer who have recently joined, who's Amit. So let me introduce myself first. So I'm working as an integration associate with One America, and I'm a MuleSoft developer, and I have 15 years plus of experience in IT, and I'm certified in MuleSoft integration developer and a platform architect. So I'm going forward. I'm looking for an integration architect certification. So I'm on my way for preparing for it. So that is more about me. And since Amit is here, I don't have a slide for you, Amit. So can you take some
Yeah,
time and you
sure,
can
sure.
introduce
Yeah.
them?
Hey, thanks everybody. Thanks for joining, taking time out of your schedule. So this is Amit Srivastava. So I am working as a technology architect in Cognizant, and I'm associated with MuleSoft for last 3 years. And I am a MuleSoft certified developer and an aspiring architect. So that's a brief introduction. Over to you, Alexa.
So we have a speaker, Alex. So Alex, I picked some things about you from your various websites and LinkedIn profiles. So if I miss something, you can add more to it. And I think so everyone knows Alex. She's more popular in our MuleSoft community, and she's one of our expert in Dataweave and other things in MuleSoft. So welcome, Alex, and it's all up to you. You can go ahead.
Thank you. So yeah, I'm one of the MuleSoft ambassadors and a meetup leader for the Toronto Online Spanish and Women Who Mule groups. I'm also a speaker and content creator, and I am ProsDev's founder, if you know about it. And I have certifications on development and architecture. I guess that's it. You're mute.
Thanks, Alex. So, and we have another guest as well, who's Manik here. So he's here, and he can pitch in anytime to ask questions or all. He can answer questions as well. So thanks, Manik, to be part of this meetup. Okay, let's start with it. Alex, I'll stop sharing from here. So if you want, you can take over from here.
All right. Can you see my screen? Okay, cool. Oops, I think I stopped sharing. Okay, there we go. All right, so I think some of you may have already seen this presentation. I've done it in like 3 different meetups, but in this case, I kind of refactored the code. So I will guide you through all of the things that the requirement was expecting of us. It was for an actual client. And then how was the procedure that we did. So the solution will make use of the following stuff. I will use the values module. I will use functions. I will show you how to use parameters using types or parameters with default values. And we will be using a tail recursive function now. Also variables, the do statement to create local variables. Object manipulation using object destructor, which is curly braces and then parentheses. If else conditions, selectors to get an index, an object from an array, and also to create ranges using the to keyword, using the default keyword to create values, to set default values, and some other curve functions or operators like isEmpty, reduce, map, with, sum, append, concatenation, which are different, equality, and equality with coercion. So let me start with the actual requirement. this stays the same as I had done before. The input JSON structure that we had is basically like a flight options array that inside has a connections array. And then we want to change all that into this output JSON structure that is basically just one huge array with objects that contain text code and connections. But how are we going to do that? So we have several rules. First, for each object from the flight options array, we have to create one output object inside the output array. Seems good enough. But then first condition that we have is to use the text code that contains the value from the last connection object. So for example, here in the flight option object, we have a connections array, and the connections array contains two different objects. So we will be using the last one to use in the applied tax code here, because we only have one applied tax code in this side. So in this case, it's DEF and not ABC. Then, if the end of connections end of connection field is true, you have to create a separate object in the output. And in this case, we'll take the tax code that is using this object. So in this case, we have true and true here. So we're taking GHI and JKL for the second object. For if there are end of connection fields that are true, and this is not the last object inside the connections array, then you have to create a new output object containing all of the false connection objects before this. For example, here we have a false and here we have a true. So we're going to take these two and put them inside of this one. And we're going to use the tax code that has the last connection here. And this one, it doesn't matter if it's true or false because it's the last object. So we're just going to take this one and put it in a new object. And finally, each applied connections object in the output must have a hard-coded type connection, like this one, and an incrementing index value throughout the complete output array. And this is the thing that makes it hard, because if you had all of the other things, it's a little bit easier to just do it with a reduce. But the thing is that you have to continue counting. So here you have 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And that's what makes it hard. So in my last solution, and I'm going to share my GitHub repository in the end so you can see both of the different solutions. In my first solution, I was kind of playing with the indexes. So it was mostly like adding and subtracting indexes to get to the number that we had at the end. But then it's kind of difficult because it contained a lot of different steps to it. And with this new solution, I'm just using one tailed recursive function that is going to basically take all of the indexes that we need and keep counting them one more. And that is, at least for me, it was easier to understand that the index one. But yeah, you can choose whichever you prefer. So we're actually gonna do this in real time. So I can show you how you can also experiment with it. I have here my browser. I'm gonna go to the Dataweave Playground. Oops. And then I'm also gonna go to this site. Oh, where you're not copying? What? JSON formatter curious concept. All right. I hope I can copy this. Yes, okay. So this is our input. I'm gonna take this and put it in the payload. And this is our expected output. I'm gonna open, I think I have beyond compare here. Yeah. So I'm gonna put it here in beyond compare. I had to format it. Okay. Okay, so I will leave it here to compare in the end if we got what we were expecting to get. And now we can get started. So the first step is to extract the connections arrays. So we have this structure, the flight options array, and then we have connections arrays inside that. And in the end, we just want to have a huge array that contains different arrays of objects with all of the connections. And so to do that, we just have to do payload dot flight options dot connections. And that's it. We have the huge array and then the array of objects inside with all of the connections. Step 2, we want to change all of the end of connections to true for the last connection object, because some of them can be false, but it doesn't really matter. It has the same following the same procedure as if it was true. So since we will just put all of them inside one huge array and we will not have them separated like this, we want to change those to false to true, so we don't make a mistake and assume that it's a false when it should be a true. Oh, yeah, sure. Does that work? I will assume that's okay. All right, so to do that, I will use a reduce. So my item will be a flight option, and then my accumulator is going to be an array. And then I want to open a context. So to do that, I will use the do keyword. And then you have to use curly braces to open the context with the do keyword. What this basically means is that I can start creating variables or functions inside these contexts here. And these are not global, so I cannot see them from outside of the reduce. Then I will create my first variable, which is last connection. And I will apply an object destructor to be able to just change one field and leave all of the other ones the same. So I will say flight option -1, because that's the only one that I want to change. And I want to update. And to use the update function, I have to import, I think it was values. Yeah. So I have to use the import DW util values. And you will continue to see this error, I think, but that's just an issue with the Dataweave playground. So I want to update the end of connection field, and I want to change it to true. And I can check if that works by doing this. So because I just have this and I don't have any accumulated so far, I'm not using the accumulator, I will just see the actual latest object. In this case is, oh, I cannot see it. Here. So we have this one, which is the array that we're checking in the end, and we have the reference ID 102. So in this case, you can see that this 102 was false, and now we're setting it to true using the update function. So we can see that this variable is working as expected. And then if we want to accumulate, we can do accumulator plus last connection, and we can see all of the last connections that we have. So we have 222, 444, which is true, and then 777, which is false, and now it's changed to true, 8, and 102. So we have all of them here, and all of them are true. So we know this variable is working. Now we want to just append all of the other connections. I create a new variable, and I'm just going to say applied option, and then take from the first one to one before the last one. And then if this cannot be found, for example, in this case, I don't have -2 object because I only have 0 and -1. I only have one object here. So if this is the case, this will return a null. So for it to not return a null, I want to create a default, which is an empty array. So in this case, if there is no -2, then just return an empty array and it will still work. So we want to take all of those plus the last connection, which is the updated object that we just created here. And now if we just change last connection for updated connections, we will now have all of the connections that we previously had. And none of them changed except for the last connections that we just saw. All right, so are there any questions so far before I continue?
No questions.
Okay. All right, so there's that. Then step 3 is to flatten the array of arrays to just be one array, because we already have, we already corrected all of the end of connections to true. Now we can continue with the behavior that we wanted, and it doesn't matter if it's true or false in the end. We already know that it should be treated as a true. So we can now flatten all of these things to just be a huge array. We can either use a flatten function like this, but it will create more parentheses than the ones that I want, and it can become a bit difficult to understand. So I think it's just easier. I mean, you can do that if you don't have any performance issues, but you can also do it just like this. Instead of doing just 1+, you can just do ++. Remember that I told you that they were different? It's because if you do 1+ with 2 arrays, it's actually an append. It's an append operator. And if you do a ++, it's a function. So there are different things. You can check the documentation. I think I added all of the references to the presentation anyway, so you can check there. So basically what it happens is that with the append, you are taking the array that you have here and you're appending it to this array. So you will continue to have an array of arrays because that's what you are appending. But if you use the ++, it actually takes out the first the first like level of arrays, and it will append them into, well, not append, it will add it to the same array that you already had. So that's why we end up with just one single array. But as I said, you can also use the flatten keyword at the beginning. And now the fun starts. We will start building detailed recursive function. So for this, we will use 4 different parameters. The first one is the connections array, which is the actual connections array that will have less and less values each time. So for each iteration, we will take one object out from the array, and that's how we will consume the whole array, is basically this array right here. Then we have the index accumulator array. With this is basically an array with different indexes that will be accumulated for the index value field. So if I can go back to my output, expected output, it will contain, for example, an array with 1 and 2 for this case. And then here will be an array with just a 3. Here an array with just a 4. And here an array with 5, 6, 7, and so on. That's what this parameter will do. Then the index will be the actual index number for each connection being evaluated. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. And the connections accumulator array. So this is the array that will keep the transformed objects or the final output. And this is the parameter that is making our function a tail function. If we didn't have this parameter, it would be just a regular recursive function and not a tail recursive function. I see a question. Reduce and flatten. Yeah, you can achieve the same functionality using any of them. But I would say if you can already do it in this step, it's just easier because this reduce is already going through all of the objects inside this array. So why don't just do it there? If you didn't have, for example, this reduce and you had just an array of arrays, then you can just straight use flatten, and that's all right. The thing is that if you're having performance issues and then you have this reduce that's already going through all of the array, and then you add another flatten on top of that, then the flatten will again go through all of the array. So if you can just take that step out and do it straight here in the reduce, that's easier for performance. But if you don't have any performance issues, you can do it either way. Right. I think that was it. Okay. So yeah, let's start building the tail function. So first we will have the connections array, and this will be an array of objects. Then we will have the index accumulator array, and this will be an array. And I will add a default value because when we call this for the first time, I want this to be empty and I don't want to manually add it. So this is my default value. And then index will be a number. And we will start with 1. Oops. And finally, the connections accumulator array, which will also be an array and will also start empty. All right, so that's our function with our parameters. And then let's start by saying if it's empty the connections array. So the first thing that we want to check is if the connections array is already empty, then we have to terminate all of this thing. Otherwise, it will continue looping forever. So if this is empty, then just return the connections accumulator array, this one, which is the final result. This is where we are accumulating all of the arrays, the array of objects that we will have in the end. And then if this is not empty, then this is where we'll start doing all of the logic. I will create another context using the do function and the curly brackets. And I will create my first variable, which is this connection. This will be an object. I like to add what type of variables I'm using sometimes, because then I get confused later if it was an object, if it was a string. And it's also easier for Dataweave to understand what you're trying to do and catch the mistakes earlier. So it's just a best practice to add that whenever you can. I understand that sometimes you don't know or you're just experimenting, so that's fine. Just try to add them whenever you do know what you're getting. And it will be my connections array, my first object. So let's see if we can test this. And then I will call this. Oh, weird. So yes, it's working so far. I'm getting the first object, which is the only object that I'm doing right now. And I'm not calling this function again, so it's not being a recursive function yet. Then we want to check if the end of connection field is true. So let's say this connection, end of connection. This will be a Boolean. This will only check if this connection dot end of connection is true. I can kind of leave it like that. But as you can see here, since I'm not really defining what kind of field this is, it's telling me, hey, you're expecting a Boolean, but we got an any, because they don't know what this end of connection field is supposed to be. So it can be a string, it can be whatever. Dataweave doesn't know. So what I like to do a lot is to use this kind of, I don't know if it's an operator, I think it is. And it's basically saying, if this field can be coerced into a true, then this will be a true, and otherwise it will be a false. So in this case, we have the 111, the end of connection is false. So this end of connection should be false. Yeah. You can see I can even like use a true in strings. Or for example, if I use a false, it will say that it's true because it is a false, even though this is an actual Boolean and this is a string. It's because I'm using this. If I were using this, it would say that it's not. So I like to use these because sometimes I'm not sure if I'm getting an actual Boolean or if I'm getting a string, and that is just easier. Obviously, if you want to make sure that it's actually a Boolean or actually a string, then you have to use the equal equal. All right, so after that, I want to get the new index accumulator array. So here is where I will put the logic to see if we should accumulate the index into this parameter right here or not. So if this connection is end of connection, oops, I missed that. Is end of connection. Okay, so if this connection is end of connection, or if this field is true, then I want to return an empty array because I want to start over. Else, like in this case, this will be the else. I want to say index accumulator array plus index. So this will this is also the append operator. So we will take the index or the number that we're getting. In this case, the index is 1. And we will add this index into this array. So in the first iteration, this will be empty and the index will be 1. So we will end up with an array with a 1 inside. And this is what this variable will have. So now we can have here the first iteration and the first index that will be added into this array. Now I want to actually call the function. So first, we need to send the connections array minus the one that we're using right here. We do connections array, and then 1, 2, minus 1. So from the second one until the end. And we want to default it to an empty array, just in case that we're already in the end and we just have 1 left. So this will return a null because we don't have a second. Then we want to send the new index accumulator array, which is this variable that we had here that contained the 1 inside the array. Now this is our new accumulator array that we will send here for the second iteration. And finally, we want to send the index plus 1. And that's all of the parameters that we had so far. And now if we were to use this as it is, it would kind of be just a recursive function and not a tail recursive function because you're not actually saving anything. Well, I would have to change some things, but you get the point. So in order for me to send the connections accumulator array, what I want to send is the structure that we will have right here with the applied text code, the applied connections, and all of that fun stuff. So I want to do an if before. For example, in this case, since I'm having an end of connection false, I don't want to add this into the final array. It's not any use to me. So I will just say if this connection end of connection, which is a Boolean variable, this is true, then we do want to create the final structure. So we will say connections accumulator array, which is this parameter right here, plus, and we will append a new object to the array that is already there. This will contain applied. I can just copy that from the beyond compare. Text code, applied connections, and then we have a type. Applied text code will be this connection dot text code, because we want to use the one that contains the end of connection true. And then the applied connections will now take all of the indexes that were accumulated in this array. So we'll do index accumulator array plus index, because we want to include this current object index as well. And then we say map, and we start mapping this array from here. Type connection, which was hard-coded. And finally, the index value will just be the index that can be found here. All right, so there's that. If this end of connection is true, oh, I'm missing commas. And now if this is not true, which is this case right here, for example, then I just want to return the connection accumulator array, which is the last array that we already had. So we're not doing any changes to it if it's false. But if it's true, then we are appending the new structure. And we can see the output. So if I copy the output and put it in my Beyond Compare, we can see that it's exactly the same that we were expecting. So how does this actually work? So we have the first iteration. We're taking this object as like this connection that we're checking in this first iteration. And basically what we're saying is that if end of connection is false, then we don't want to accumulate anything here, but we want to accumulate the current index, which is 1, into the index accumulator array. So we're taking the index, we're putting it here, and the next connection will have that index there. So in the second iteration, now we have these 2, 2, 2, and we already have the index 1 in this array, and we don't have anything here. Now our index is 2, and this end of connection is true. So we do want to add this part into the connections accumulator array. And we wanted to add 2 additional objects that had index 1 and index 2. So that's why we were using the map in the end to add that this index into this array, and then mapping all that into the final output. So now for the third iteration, we already have the previous connection, which was 1 and 2, and the applied tax code DEF, which is here. And so now we're on index 3, and index 3 has end of connection true. So we also want to add this in here, and we don't want to add this index in here. We want this to remain empty. So we do that. And now we have 1, 2, and 3, and the applied tax code is GHI, just as we had before. And now we're on index 4. We have these 2 objects in the output, and our end of connection is true. So we're gonna add this here directly, and we're not gonna add this index here. So now we have this 4 here. We are on index 5. Our end of connection is false, so we want to add this index into the accumulator. We add it here, there's no change here. And now our 6th index is also false in the end of connection. So we want to add it here, and we don't want to change anything here. Now we have 5 and 6, nothing changed. And our end of connection is true for index 7. So now we are going to add 5, 6, and 7 into this accumulator array. And we're gonna return this index accumulator into an empty array. 5, 6, 7, now our index is 8, and it's for true, it's end of connection true. So we want to add it here, and so on and so on. I put to be continued because I will not finish with all of that, but you can get the feeling of what we're doing. All right, so you can try it yourself to check everything that I just did and kind of digest it. The GitHub repository, I will put it in the chat. Just github.com/Alexander Martinez, and you can check the reviewing a complex Dataweave transformation use case repository. And you will see there also my previous presentation with the previous indexes thing. if you want to try that out and see if that's easier for you, then you can just do that approach. That is also using recursive function, but I think it's not that complex like this one. And all of the references for you to check. There you can see all of the documentation of everything that I just used. And you can see the differences between the append operator and the plus plus function when you're using arrays and why they're different. And if you have any questions, you can contact me in my website, alexandramartinez.world, or in my LinkedIn, /Alexandra and Martinez, or in my Twitter as well. And that's it. Do you have any questions for me?
We don't see any questions yet. Yeah, someone is there. Can you please provide the PPT? Yes, we'll be providing the presentation as well.
Yeah, and also in the repository that I just posted, you can check there the links to the other presentations as well.
We need to try it out, whatever Alex has shown us. Only then you can come up with more questions, I guess.
Yeah, you can write whenever you want, and you can ask me questions as well.
Yeah, I had asked Alex many times, so she's very good in answering the questions. So
yes. Thanks, Manik.
okay. Okay. If we don't have any more questions, then okay, please let us know to improve the performance of API. So Anil, like, he has told us different ways, like which functions to use in order to use the improve the performance. I don't know what Anil was overall performance, or what do you mean?
Actually, there is a post to where is it? Here to check understand the Vigo complexity in Dataweave. It was posted by some Muley. And it's pretty good. You can check that out to kind of understand how can you see the complexity of your code or of your algorithm, however you want to see it. When to use write and read functions. Well, basically, if you want to read kind of like, I don't know, for example, if you have a JSON object, but it's in a string format or something like that, you can use the read function, and you can put what kind of input is that thing that you want to read from. And if you want to write, for example, if you have an XML format and you want to write it into a string, you can use the write function. So basically, do you want to input something into your script, or do you want to output something from your script?
Okay. Any more questions? Okay. Dhananjay Verma. More complex looking solution, but the walkthrough was so good that no notes. Okay.
Yeah, I think the initial approach was more complex, in my opinion,
Yeah.
but this one is just easier for me to understand.
How much data can we store on a payload and set variable without any performance issue?
Good question. I'm not sure, but I know that you can use a stream option. So maybe you can use something like that, or maybe Manik has a better idea.
Yes.
That's very hey, that's very use case based question, right? You without really knowing what you have in payload or what you have in there.
Yeah, the payload can be small or
Yeah.
huge.
One thing I will probably just give a hint towards is depends on your script plus Dataweave component by threading profile. It always takes the IO thread or more thread, right, compared to the set variable. So if you have a very straightforward, simple static assignment, try to use set variable, because it's not gonna use your IO thread for that. On the other hand, if you have a complex script, don't try to put that in set variable, because you're probably gonna have a small, like a lightweight thread to do a bigger script execution, which could cause issues. So it depends on how big and complex your script is. Simpler static, I tend to put it in set var, like just a is equal to 1 to 3, or a simple static structure initialization. That's what I can say.
And Manik, one more thing, like I just had out. So when we have, so let's say for example, you're setting multiple variables, is it better to use separate set variables for each of the variable, or can we use a Dataweave transform component where we can set all the variables?
It goes back to the same thread execution of the components, because we need to understand when components are getting executed from one component to another component, there could be thread context switching, right? There could be thread switching that happens, and thread switching is always expensive. So more you avoid those is better, which means sequencing set variables like 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. If you have those longer chains, it's better to put them into single transform variables, so that in the same thread, without switching the context, the runtime can execute that. But for one or two set variable sequence, it's fine. If you are like really sequencing 8 or 9 or 10, like a longer the chain, more the possibility of thread switching there.
Thread switching.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Alex, go ahead.
Please.
Any more questions? Anyone has? Okay, I think so. No more questions. So let's go to the exciting part. The
I
quiz
forgot
part.
to explain just
Okay.
one single thing.
Yeah, sure.
Let me open another. And for those of you that haven't seen the error that you get when you use a recursive function without a tail recursive function, let me show you. I have here the script. So basically we have this sum, and we're basically gonna sum like all of the numbers. For example, we have 1, we have 2, then we sum 2 plus 1, and we have a 3, and then 3 plus 2 plus 1, and we have a 6, and so on. So if we do 250, it goes all okay. 254 still works. And then if you do 255, you get a Stack Overflow error, because you can just do 256 times, basically. So this is what happens when you are not using a tail recursive function, which is basically just summing everything here. If number is more than 0, then just take the number and sum everything to it. So in order for you to create a tail recursive function, you would have to add here the other parameter. And then instead of just summing everything here, you would have to send the results of this sum into here. So that's how it would work, basically. I guess it would be something like number, let's put this result. Number minus 1. And then result would be number plus result. Would it? I think so. No. All right. Well, I don't have that right now, but basically that's what happens. when you are not using tail recursive functions. You will get this error. And if you want to just continue using more and more, then you would have to do the same thing that I just did, which is just add another parameter here with the result. And then instead of just calling the function directly here, you would have to send the result into that function. So what we just did here, which was sending this, keeping this array accumulated here and sending it over and over as a parameter into the next one, instead of calling everything like it's happening here. And that's it. So if you want to continue with the quiz.
We have one more question, Alex, from Arnav.
Oh, when we put multiple outputs in a single transform, output targets, you mean like sending different variables and payloads into one transform message component? Yes, I think so. As far as I know, it does execute parallel. But maybe Manik knows the actual answer to that.
No, not definitive answer, because never really paid that close attention to like how they are executing. The only thing, maybe because I never had a dependency of one output on the other output, so maybe never noticed whether they are running, but they should be parallel.
I think so. It's bad because I have faced sometimes some issues. What better do it in separate transforms? Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't had any performance issues by doing it that way. So I don't know, maybe it can, but I haven't seen it so far. Else for tail recursive to result. Probably I didn't I didn't write down the tail recursive function of this one. I just wanted to demonstrate what would happen if you don't use it. Yeah, so we can go ahead with the quiz maybe.
Okay. Thanks, Alex. So let me, since we have only few people, I'll post the questions directly on the chat. So you can reply on the chat the answers, and we can link the person who have answered the question. So let me put a separator in the chat. Okay. Okay, here comes the first question. Chat. So, what error do you get when you use a regular recursive function instead of tails? Okay, that was easy answer just now. Alex explained. So I think so. It's Kishore Katragada who answered first. So, Alex, this is the right answer, right?
Yes.
Okay, Kishore, can you just share me your email ID?
That was quick because it was on the top of people.
Yes. Okay. Okay, I'll go ahead and pose the next question. So next one, what is the syntax to use the object destructor? So you have options A, B, C, and D. So Alex, is A the right answer?
Yes.
Okay, and Arnab Majumdar is the person who answered it. Arnab, can you please share me your email ID? Arnab, are you there? Can you just share me your email ID? Okay, thank you. So I have the next question coming up. So this is the last question for today. Yeah, what is the syntax to use the do operator? You have options A, B, C, D. So Alex, which is the right answer?
It's A.
Yeah. So again, I think so all the answers had A as the right answer.
Yes.
Okay. So Alex Senden, congrats. And can you just share me your email ID?
Here's how to do it tail, by the way. Yes, you have to put the result here. And basically you have to send the number -1 and then the result plus number. And that's how you can do it like a sum tail function. And now you can just use whichever numbers you want and it will still work. And here it doesn't work if you go past 256. But yeah, just wanted to do that really quick.
That was really good. Thanks, Alex. So the winners are, I pinged in the chat. So confirm me whether your emails are right. It's Kishore, Arnab, and Alex. Congrats for all three of you. So I'll send you all the details to your email IDs. And thanks everyone. And for everyone to know, we have a next meetup for Indian meetup on May 2nd on Anytime Monitoring. So if anyone is interested, and please share and please enroll. And if you have any feedback, positive or negative, please feel free to share so that we can improve ourselves. And even in case if anyone is interested to be a speaker in our next meetup, please either let me or Amit know so we can have you as a speaker in our future meetups. And thanks, Alex. Thanks so much to accept my invitation and be a part of our meetup. And thanks, Manik, to be there and to help us in answer some of the questions. Thank you so much. And thanks, Amit.
Thanks. I was here to watch Alex's script and enjoy it.
Yeah, I know. I'm a fan of
Yes,
Alex.
me too.
So, yeah.
I sent a just an FYI, I sent a link on the chat about that last question execution order. If you see the note at the bottom, it clearly says execution order of multiple outputs may vary. So make sure the transformations are independent of each other. And mine were always like that. That's why probably I never noticed whether it's important or not. So just by practice, they were different. Okay.
Yeah. I had some issues when I used to, in the same transform, I used to set a variable and use in another variable, the same variable. So I had some issues with that. That's when I realized, okay, it's not the right way to do that.
Yeah. Thanks.
Okay.
Ikram,
Thank you, everyone.
Take one group photo for the, and we can make if everybody is okay with the camera.
So let me. Is there an option to enable video for everyone at one shot, or how's it?
I'm not sure. Okay, I think only the host will be getting that.
You would have to do it manually one by one.
Okay. Can you start doing it, Amit? I'll do from the starting. You can do from
so
the
we have to
end.
make a host, right?
Yes.
You don't need to make host, like presenter is enough, I think.
Okay. Alex, was it your cat that came in your session? I heard some
Oh
cat
yeah,
sound.
I thought you didn't hear her, but yeah.
I did hear.
Most of I have done.
Okay.
I think
Okay. Okay, I think so we have everyone. So
It's time to smile.
yeah, cheese. Yeah. Okay, thank you everyone. Thank you so much. And thanks Alex, thanks Manik, thanks Amit, and thanks everyone to
Thanks,
be part of
everyone.
this meetup. I hope to see you in future. Bye.
Thanks.